Good evening. Hope you all found your way to the right place. This is CP2 Biology with me, Mr. Heenan, in room E210 or some room in your house, depending on what day it is. And my contact information down at the bottom, the best way to reach me is my school email. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. What I'd like to do with you tonight is take you through kind of a day in the life of your students in the classroom. So I'm going to take you through kind of what we would normally do, starting with a warm-up activity. So if you could take out a pencil or a pen and a pad of paper, we're going to do something similar to what we would be doing in class. Now, this activity happens to be further down the road for the class, like February or March. But let's see how you do with it. All right, so here we go. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to show you a series of images. I want you to tell me whether you think that organism is real or not. All right, here we go. First one, mule. So write down on your piece of paper the word mule and write down whether you think it's real or mythical. Next one, liger. What do you think? Real or mythical? The centaur. Real or mythical? The beefalo. What do you think? Real or mythical? The griffin. Real or mythical? The tigon. Is that thing real or mythical? The wolfen. Real or mythical? The growler bear. Real or mythical? And the humanzee. What do you think? Real or mythical? So once all the students have their answers, what we then do as a group, we go back over it and we would get an idea of what do people think. So I would kind of take a survey. All right, how many people thought the mule was real? Raise your hand. Right? And fortunately, most people say, yes, that is real. A mule is real. Next one, the liger. That is also real. The centaur. Unfortunately, not real, even though it's a great costume. The beefalo. That's real. The griffin. Not real. The tigon. That's real. The wolfen. Also real. The growler bear. Real. And the humanzee. Not real. So what's the purpose of this or any of these warm-up activities that we do in class? The purpose is to kind of draw out of the students what they may already know about the topic that we're going to address. And it might be that it's a brand new topic and I want to see what do you know from previous years of education or what do you just know in general? Or it might be related to something that we've done before in class. This is brand new. So in this, I'm trying to draw out of them, what do you know about these organisms that maybe you've heard of? And I asked them, can you think of anything that these things share in common? And people will raise their hand and say, I hear a mule is sterile. It can't reproduce. I said, that's a great observation. In fact, if you take a look at most of these that were real, they can't reproduce. They can't make more mules or whatever, more ligers. So that's the end of the line. Or they don't live very long. And others say, well, is it the combination of two different species breeding together? I say, yes, great observation. And that's what it is. And you get these things called hybrid species. And what I want to draw out of them, and the purpose of this is that when we're talking about evolution, a key point in evolution is this dividing line between when do you see a new species? When is that a brand new species that is different from a previous one? And that dividing line is what we call reproductive isolation. That form can no longer successfully breed with a previous form or a closely related organism. And by definition, successful reproduction means the offspring have to live and they have to be able to reproduce. So these things that we went through today, they're not new species. They are the two species that bred to make them are two different species. That's what defines it. So a horse and a donkey that bred to get the mule, two different species. The Angus beef cattle and the buffalo that bred to get the beefalo, two different species, right? The growler bear, which came from the polar bear with the grizzly bear, two different species. So that's why we do this, to kind of draw out of them what they may already know. We then typically follow a warm-up with maybe a brief lecture about the topic, followed by a worksheet, which we usually will do in groups. Group work's a little different this year, though, because we can't really work in groups when we're in the classroom. So oftentimes we may do breakout sessions in our Zoom sessions and have students kind of work in pairs or in threes and discuss things and then report back to the group. And then often we'll follow it up with some sort of hands-on or lab activity. When we're in the classroom, you may have heard your students talk about, we used the microscopes last week to look at different cell types. The week before that, we looked at the complexity of molecular structures and modeling what they look like. Unfortunately, we can't do experiments in class this year. So instead, what we're doing is the science department got a license for this Pivot Interactives, which allows them to actually do experimentation so they don't miss out on that opportunity. So if you get a chance to sit down with your student and ask them to log into Pivot Interactives and see the lab that they did last week, and we'll do another one next week. And then there's at-home work, what they should be doing. So every week they check in at the beginning of the week in Google Classroom. And on Google Classroom, it takes them through, all right, this is the plan for the week. This is what we're doing when we're in session. This is what you should be doing at home. And everything has a due date marked with it, and it's assigned in Google Classroom. All right. So that's kind of the basic setup and taking you through kind of a day in the life of what goes on. This shouldn't look foreign to you. This is our course overview. I sent this home that first day or second day of school. You were to sit down and go over it with your child. And in it, it gives you the breakdown of what we're going to cover throughout the year. Now, I've given you what might happen, right? We might have a midterm exam, which will cover everything we've done from the first and second quarter. That remains to be seen with what happens with the year. And the same thing with the final exam. Maybe it'll happen. We don't really know yet. One thing that has been stated by the state is that there will be an MCAS test. So the students will be taking biology and MCAS as of right now. This will be in June, and it covers everything that we've done. But we do plenty of preparation to make sure that students do well on that. So that's kind of the course overview. And as for what to expect at home, usually there's like 2 to 3 assignments per week they should be working on at home. And those would be more of the academic practices. If you look at our breakdown of what our categories are for grades, homework, classwork, participation. With assessments, we've had 2 quizzes already. We're going to have another one this week. Projects, the lab they just did last week fits into that. There'll be a few research projects that we do throughout the year as well. And take note, these are approximate percentages. Usually it's going to be pretty close to that, but we might be off depending on the marking period. All right. So that's kind of it for me in terms of what you can expect of your kids. If you want to know what their grade is like, check in on Aspen. I try to update Aspen usually every 2 weeks and let you know what's happening with your students' performance. So as I said before, please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. Just contact me with my school email address. I thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy the rest of the night and take care.